I mean, the biggest deal breaker with this wine is that it just says California Appellation, right? I know nothing about the producer. That's a big, huge red flag. For me, it should be for you. But all of that together spells doom and gloom to me. Trying to rope me into talking a whole bunch of You know, I'm not negative. I don't want to be. See, look at this. So today we have 6 wines here in front of us, and I'm gonna try to see if the labels hold up to the actual wine inside of the bottles. And then we're gonna taste the wines to see how close I got. So the goal of today is to teach you how to read the label so you know more about the wine that's actually inside the bottle. You know, the really confusing part about wine is that you actually have to know something about wine to actually kind of decipher and read your way through this whole kind of crazy system. So I've divided the wines into a couple of categories. We have what we're calling the New World, and then we have the Old World, and then we kind of sort of have like this hybrid thing going on here. New World labels tend to lead with grape varietal, so it'll tell you which grape that you're actually consuming or what's actually in the bottle. When we generally talk about New World wines, those are wines that are fruit forward. They tend to grow from warmer places. So think of South America, Australia, those types of places. And when we talk about Old World, we're talking about Europe. Traditionally, they actually talk about the grape from a place. And then this kind of hybrid kind of has both. It tells you the grape, and it also is named after a place. So we're gonna take a look at some of the labels now, but we're gonna start with the appellation and region. So first up, we have the Got Pablo. It's red wine from Spain, Grenache. It looks bigger than most bottles, but looking at the label, it doesn't really tell me much. It's not giving in any way, just has the name and some artwork. The first thing is like, where's it from? But as far as region, I know that we're in Spain. It's a trend that I'm starting to see now where a lot of wines don't have much information on the front. The key is that they want you to pick it up. They want you to look at it. So you're gonna turn it around and find out more about it. Ultimately, where the grapes are picked and harvested matter the most. So next up, this is the Vinquigo. This is called the Violet Swell. This is from the Redwood Valley in California. Being more specific about where the grapes come from, you get more control over what's happening with the grapes. So this wine is from California, but it's also from the Redwood Valley. And so you know that at least 85% of the grapes are coming from that particular valley. Next up is Tuxoc Jumper. When I look at the region and it just says USA and then wine of California on the back, it doesn't give me great hope that this wine would be of great quality, which we talked about location, location, location. If it had a vineyard, if it had a region, I would think that it would be better quality. It might do the job, but you know, I'm not real sure if it's something that I would pick up off the shelf and want to purchase. But we don't know anything about it because the true taste is what's inside the bottle. So next up is an Old World wine. I'm sure that you can tell just by looking at it. This is a Docheta the Alba. So the region is Alba. It's Doceto from Alba in the Piemonte region of Italy. So right there, automatically we know exactly where we're at. Here you see the name of the place. Underneath, this is the DOC, which is the governing body that controls this particular growing region. It's saying that this name needs to be protected, and these are the rules of what you can be grown there, how long they can be aged, and the style of which the wine was made. You see here, there's a little DOC ribbon here just to confirm and to let everybody know that this is coming from Alba. So next up, if you haven't guessed, another example of an Old World wine here. This is Sangikayu, and this is from the Rhone region of France in an appellation called Valcarès. In France, the governing body is called Appellation de Contrôle, so we shorten that to AOC. So you'll see Valcarès on the label here. So the tricky part is that it tells you the region, but it doesn't tell you anything about the grapes. So you have to know something about that particular region to understand what grapes are being used. All of this information is readily available. You know, everybody has a smartphone in their pocket. I feel like if you're in a store, if they're not busy and someone can help you, I'm sure that they would much rather you talk to them. The idea is that they're not an expert in your taste, they're just a tour guide. They know the inventory better, they know the wine list better than you do. That's their job. So really use them to make an educated decision. All right, so next up, we kind of have our hybrid bottle here. So Old World meets New World in a sense. When I look at it, the front label here, you see something that says AOG, and so I'm not sure what that means. After that, it says Zintana, so I'd assume that that's the particular region that the wine is from. I'd have to confirm that, but from looking at the front label, I can tell that the wine is actually from Morocco. It is kind of surprising that you're like, oh wow, this is from Morocco, but I'm sure they have a lush history of making wine there. But this would be something that I would be intrigued in tasting, right? Just for the edification of like, just like what do wines from that area taste like. Now we're gonna talk about the name of the wine and the grape varietal. The name of this wine is Violet Swell. The grape varietal here is Carillon. This is from California. This is what we would call a fantasy name. Now that I know what the grape varietal is, which is Carillon, which generally you think of crushed violets and those kind of things, it's very aromatic and floral. I would guess that's the reason why they would use this particular name for this wine. Marketing sometimes kind of falls into this area where if you're a winemaker, you're an artisan, right? You're pure. And the idea that marketing is a bad word, and that's not it. A lot of times for winemakers, it helps try to connect what they were feeling to the wine, to the consumer. So it could be marketing, but I think for a lot of times it just kind of helps tells the story. So here, no fantasy name or anything like that. There's not much to go on. It just gives you the grape varietal. It just says Merlot. So that gives you an indication of kind of what it would taste like, soft tannins, those kind of things. But other than that, I don't really have anything else to go off of. And a bear wearing a sweater, I'm not real sure what that means, right? I mean, he has fur. Why is he wearing a sweater? I don't know. Judging from the front label, it's labeled USA. It just says Merlot. Already, I'm thinking that this wine is under $10, under 12 for sure. So now this is an example of old world wine here. It's called Docheta the Alba. What's interesting, if you're kind of looking around for the grape varietal, it's not listed prominently, but it actually kind of is, right? Doceto is the name of the grape, and that's listed here on the front. You wouldn't be able to use this name, Docheta the Alba, if it wasn't sanctioned by the DOC, which is listed here, the Appellation. So those two kind of go hand in hand. If you look at the back of the label, it just says red wine. The governing body could say that it's only 100% Doceto. Legally, different appellations set how much of the grape varietal needs to be on it before you can put it on the front. This wine is called Vacaras, right? So it's named after the region. So based on the name, you understand you have to know something about that particular region, but generally you're looking at Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Cinsault. Those are the popular grapes that are from in that particular area, but it can be any combination of those. All of this is intimidating. Like, it's not your job. Like, how are you supposed to know? Are you like, it seems like in order to appreciate wine, like you have to study about it, and that is kind of the tricky part. In order to enjoy great wine, you don't really need to know much about it or where it comes from, and I don't think that you have to be an expert in wine to fulfill that desire. So the name of this wine is Sirocco. It does say Syrah on the front. So here I'm trying to figure out what's exactly inside of the bottle. So I'm thinking Syrah, but then I think about Morocco, and I don't know much about Morocco. It's the northern coast of Africa, so I do know the climate. It is slightly warm where a grape like Syrah thrives. From those two things, I'm really intrigued to taste the wine. In general, knowing the name of the wine, it's good to know, but it doesn't really give you any real insight. Knowing what the grape varietal is gets you closer to what's actually inside the bottle. So next up, we're gonna talk vintages. It's important that the wine have a vintage, that it be vintage dated, and that's an indication to let you know that all of these particular grapes were harvested in this particular year. Something that you're gonna drink every day, vintage doesn't really matter as far as longevity, but vintage really plays more in a role overall if you're talking about more expensive wines, trophy wines, wines that you want to lay down. I think as you start to get more and more into wine, vintage will start to matter more to you. But I think at the beginning, you just want to make sure that it has a vintage on it because that is a sign of quality. But vintage plays an important role, but less of a role, in my opinion, when you're first getting into wine. We have all the wines here. We have vintages on all of them. I think that's more important than me going through each particular wine and saying how the vintage affected the wine, but they all have vintages, which means it's a big plus. All right, so now we're gonna actually talk about the artwork, the label, the design. Is it really important? Some people say yes, some people say no, but I think 90% of people buy wine just based on what the artwork looks like in the label. So when I look at a label like this, it doesn't really tell me much about the wine, and I think that's kind of the purpose. It's art for all intents and purposes, right? Art is subjective. But to me, what it says in general, overall, just seems like they don't take themselves serious. I would probably be more likely to buy it because it seems light and fun. If I had to rate mustaches, I like mine better. All right, a little short, sweet here, there you go. So all the labels have to be submitted to the government. And what's interesting is that to the government, the back label is actually the front label. And so the front could really be anything, as long as there's, it's not obscene or anything like that, they generally pass it. So here we have the Vinkigo. It's kind of a cool label. It's bright. It's got some cool minimalist design elements going on here in that sense of how the cartoons are drawn. I'm drawn to the wine because of the color. Even when you talk about marketing, it's in a clear glass so you can kind of marvel and look at a color. There's no foil here either. Generally, you'll see foil on a lot of the other labels. I think sometimes that's a marketing decision. I mean, you save some money or that kind of thing, but you actually get to, take a look at the cook artwork here, which is kind of cool, and kind of a message in a bottle. All of those things kind of add up to different elements to it. To me, this is all about fun and having a great time. All right, we're back to Two Sock Jumper. It's kind of cool, but it just kind of follows that whole thing that we talk about. Put a critter on the bottle and it sells. But generally speaking, if it was a higher price point, then maybe. But other than that, kind of a cool illustration, but doesn't do anything else for me. It's a bear. Does he drink wine? I'm not real sure, but I don't feel moved by this wine to want to buy it. Keeping at it, this is old world, kind of the same thing. How do you know they're there? Script, lots of information. There's generally some type of etching of the vineyard / chateau, and it looks very regal. So also what's interesting too, on a lot of these wines that are regional, they have what's a regional bottle. So this is from Baccarat, this is the crest here, and it's embossed on the particular bottle. So thinking about overall artwork, it doesn't really tell you anything about the wine. Maybe it helps you tell the story, but it doesn't really do anything other than that. However, I know it's easiest for people to shop by label, definitely when they feel like there's a connection, but that's kind of like shopping in a minefield. All right, so next up, we're gonna talk about two different categories here. We're gonna talk about producer name, and we're also gonna talk about the importer. And these are the people who actually select the wines, have the relationship, and they're like kind of the middleman. They're bringing the wines from, in this instance, from Spain into the United States. They build a portfolio, so they have intimate relationships with this particular producer. And it's important, right? Because, you know, sometimes you might look at a wine and you don't know anything about it. Maybe it's new, you never heard of it before. But if you start to take note of the importer, you know, that signifies some type of quality and standards that you should be trustworthy with. So if you hadn't had this wine before, but you've had other wines that have T. Edwards, if you look on the back, it has this T on it, then you should be able to take some comfort in that. Since this is a domestic wine, there's no importer, so there's nothing to look for on the back or anything like that. This is made here in the United States and sold here. So now these are old world examples. Giacomo Pinocchio is the name of the producer. This is an Italian wine, so it's imported here in the United States. So if you're looking at the back here, imported by Skurnik. I talk to people all the time, they're like, wow, you know, like when I taste wines from like Italy or France or something like that, they just taste so much better and they're inexpensive. And it's like, yeah, there's no inherent land costs. You know, that land has been in those people's families for over 100 years. So they don't have to pay for the land anymore. Versus if you go to some place like Napa, it's like $1 million an acre, right? Somebody's paying for that, and that's the consumer. Another old world example, Domaine les Sangikayu, so Blood of the Stones, kind of says it all. And then if you look on the back, one of the famous importers probably in the world, the guy by the name of Kermit Lynch. Kermit has such a following that I think there's some wine stores that their whole motto is they only buy his wines and they only sell his wines in their store. I think, you know, that's how much they believe and respect, you know, Kermit's palate. And so generally speaking, you know, if you like those styles of wine, you can't go wrong with shopping Kermit wines. So next up, we're going to talk about what we call the X factor. And these are just kind of extra things on the label that can lend more information and or be unuseful or just of interest in any way. So here we're looking at the bottle of wine. In the back, there's a lot of stickers here, a lot of certifications. So USDA, organic, this wine is certified vegan. So you know that this wine is not fined with egg whites, which traditionally a lot of wines are. You have the Demeter, which is a sign of biodynamic. You have to know about what each of these stickers means and the organization means, but they can tell you a lot about what's in the bottle. Being organic, biodynamic, and all those things were just kind of a way of life for a lot of wineries. It wasn't used as a marketing term. And I would have to say in the last 20 years, and with a lot of these organizations coming up with their own stamps of approval, now you're starting to find them on a bottle, rightfully so, because you know these are the things that matter to people. All right, so next up is the two-sock jumper. There's tons of crazy stuff on the back, kind of overcrowded and weird in a way. You know, you have a thermometer here, a temperature gauge, maybe on how to serve it. It's telling you what you can pair things with, and so, you know, it's barbecue, salads, and pizza. Just seems overcrowded and like a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm confused, and you know, this kind of looks like someone threw up on the piece of paper. Save this part for your website, right, or something like that, and kind of give, you know, more straightforward information. But that was just my general thought. When we talk about X factor, I feel like we maybe skipped over something here, and for me, you know, the alcohol is always an indicator. So on the side it'll say ABV and it'll give you a number, and that can really kind of tell you, you know, the style of wine in the sense of like, is it full body, medium body, light body, those kind of things. So here looking at it, you know, this says 12%, and you perceive alcohol as weight on your palate. So the higher alcohol wines tend to be richer and full body and mouthfeeling. So next up, we want to look at the back label here. And for a lot of them, you see the stock text. There's the government warning that everybody's required to have, and it must be at least 2 millimeters tall. And then you see something that says contains sulfites, and that's something that you need to add by the government. And you know, that's kind of a tug of war somewhat in the wine world. All wines contain sulfites, so when someone says no sulfites, it's a byproduct of fermentation. There's sulfites in the wine. Kind of weird thing where everybody's like, oh, it has sulfites, it gives me a headache. And you know, generally speaking, there's probably more sulfites in one slice of bread than there is in a whole bottle of wine. Probably what you're allergic to is, you know, the histamines if you're allergic to something, or you just had a whole bunch of wine with sugar in it that was and gave you a headache. So the big question is, can you actually judge a wine by its label? I think that you can, and now I'm gonna show you how to do it. Two Sock Jumper. Based on everything I've seen on the front and back label, this would probably be my last wine I would pick, my least favorite. I mean, the biggest deal breaker with this wine is that it just says California Appellation, right? I know nothing about the producer. That's a big, huge red flag. For me, it should be for you. Normally probably found at a grocery store, which you can find great wine there. But all of that together spells doom and gloom to me. If I had to rate this label, it's probably a D. We'll see, we'll taste it. Trying to rope me into talking a whole bunch of shit. I'm not negative, I don't wanna be, see, look at this. The color looks all right. Smells like wine. Wow, I might have put my foot in my mouth. It smells good, it smells promising. Feels a little hot, so kind of high in alcohol, burning my throat as it goes down. I say that would make the wine not balance. This is pretty solid, I mean, it tastes like it's real. It doesn't have a whole bunch of additives to it. This is okay, this is better than what I thought it would be. After tasting it, call it C-. It's solid. So next up at number 5, we're going with the Gope Oblo. I think for me, what makes this wine promising, it's less about what's on the front label. As I turn it over, it's vegan. I see the importer, T. Edwards. I see, that it's organic, so those lead me down this path of saying, hey, this is probably something I want to taste. I want to see what's going on here. If I had to rate it now, like before tasting it, I would give this a C. I don't really know what I'm gonna get, and it seems like there was some thought going into it. I'm anxious to try it. Still have a good screw cap. So light color, that's what Grenache is supposed to look like. Slightly deceptive because could have pretty big tannins. Smelling a little strawberry, raspberry. This is solid. This is definitely, for me, easy drinking. Hence, maybe that's where the name comes from. This is gulpable. Like, you can definitely drink this wine. Low alcohol, it's 12%. And also, I think, probably, represents value. I would actually give this wine a B. Pretty solid, over-delivers on value. This is good. Coming in hot at number 4 is the Venkigo. Just the overall packaging was intriguing, just looking at the colors, but being able to look at the wine in the clear glass. Kind of has the no packaging on the top. It's kind of, you're thinking, this is more in the natural wine kind of segment of things if I had to put it in a category. I think here, just that it's in a clear bottle, it just, it looks appetizing to me. It's like, oh, wow, let me check this out. Let's see what's going on here. It is Carignan, which I'm interested to see. This is a grape that you normally find in the south of France. It's in Redwood Valley. High hopes for this wine. I would say B. So cherries. It smells like a little bit of mint. That's good, that's refreshing. Cherries, wood spice. This is definitely a natural wine. It has that, that term is like, it smells natty, it tastes natty, but it's not off the deep end. I feel like it's a sound wine. That's actually really tasty. This is a really cool wine. B+. This is what I expected. All right, in third place here, we have the Sirocco from Morocco, from Talvin and Alain Grelot. I was just intrigued by this wine, just reading the back label about how this partnership happened. I'm not real familiar with wines from Morocco, so there's that curiosity thing circling back around. It's Syrah, so I'm familiar with that. I know what it's supposed to taste like, but I've never had any from Morocco. So this year, I'd probably say B+. You guys ready to taste? So it's got that dark, rich Syrah color. Smells like Syrah. Smells meaty, savory, rosemary. It's great. I didn't even know they can make Syrah like that in Morocco. I know. I'm sure you guys are like, we know Morocco. It's from Morocco now. I don't know how many times I've said it. This is every bit of what I would want Syrah to be. I give this an A. All right, next up we have Doceto. Just very classic label. Looking at the back, it is imported by Skurnik. It's an importer that I recognize and have some experience with, and so that's why it comes in at number 2. I'm just thinking of classic Doceto. I mean, it has that label. Tart and lots of dark fruit is kind of what I'm expecting here. If I had to grade this label on labels, I give it an A, right? It's kind of a weird way to look at it, but like if we were just judging the labels based upon traditionally what they look like, this seems like everything checks out here. Dusty, a little bit of leather, some cedar, raspberries, red berries. It's classic Doceto, rich, slightly ripe, pretty decent tannin. It's sucking the moisture out of my mouth. It's great, it's everything that it should be. I give that an A. So last but not least, numero uno pick from Vaccaras. This is Sangikayu. So old world classic style label from Vaccaras. coupled with the importer, Kermit Lynch. If I was looking at those things, I would feel more comfortable saying this wine is probably gonna taste exactly what I'm expecting, what they're advertising, so to speak. I have high hopes for this wine. I love Kermit and the stuff that he brings in. I would have had to rate this wine. I'm thinking A, right? This is kind of the top of the list. If I was shopping, this would be the one that I would go to. To me, it kind of looks boring, but you don't drink the label. Hence, that's why we're doing this tasting. Oh yeah. Dark ruby color. Smells old world, smells like the Rhone. A little tapenade, with black olive, a little bit of white pepper. There's a savory component there. Kind of almost smells kind of bloody in kind of a weird way. You know, hence the name. Leaps and bounds. Better than any of the wines that we tasted today. I mean, just when you taste it, how it just sits on your palate. It's just a different beast than everything else we tasted. There's a little manure, which I actually kind of like. It's slightly what we call mousy, so kind of has a little bit of Brettanomyces to it, which is the technical term. This is awesome. This is like, I want you guys to all try it. You guys should try this. Maybe if we have enough glasses. This is A+, all the way. This is A+. This is, I might have to drink some tonight. So today, just by looking at the labels, we're able to figure out what we were gonna get inside the bottle. The cool thing about wine is that the more you drink, the better you become at it. And you accumulate knowledge just by drinking, not even thinking that you're doing it, right? It's just kind of native. But ultimately, pass that information on to your wine shop and let them do their work, like let them do their job. It's just a fucking slippery slope right here. Like, the only way that you get better at this is to drink more, right? It's called practice. Keep drinking. Your relationship with wine is not about monogamy. Drink all of it, any of it, anywhere you can find it. And that's the only way you're gonna get better. Wine people love to talk. You can't get them to shut up about stuff. Tune them out every now and then, but I'm gonna keep talking. I'm talking. Someone's staring at me over here because we're going over time. We should probably taste now.